Welcome to the Sean Trey Show. I've got a fun guest with me tonight. Would you like to tell people who you are and what you do?
Of course. My name is Alex, Alexander Verbitskiy. If you want to look me up online somewhere, I do all things that have to do with sound. I do things from setting up studios to mixing songs to an occasional score to creating English dubs. I do a lot of that work since the start of the pandemic, and if it has to do with sound, I probably have something to do with it.
So talk to me about why have the dubs been more common since the start of the pandemic?
Well, to be fair, I don't really have the insider information, so to speak, but I think probably it had to do with a lot of shows kind of like stopping production, and a lot of the streaming companies kind of just tapping into existing catalog of international shows. That would be my guess. Again, like I'm just assuming that's the case.
Yeah, makes sense.
But yeah, we've definitely seen a good growth in dubbing workflows and clients, different streaming companies just looking for either adding shows to their catalog or like redoing certain shows with modern sort of like dubbing standards and whatnot. Yeah,
that's a good point. Well, and so how did you get into this whole world? How did you say? How did you start into this world of sound?
It's been a long and very kind of like a wavy road. I think it like. As a whole, it just has to do with my curiosity and just love of like figuring stuff out. Way back in the day, I was in a band in college, and we were like, well, we have a few songs that are kind of we thought were cool. They were not, but that's a different story. And we're like, all right, well, we live in a small town in the middle of nowhere. There aren't really like any studios around here. There are a couple like small ones, a few cities like away from us. Why don't we just like figure out how to record ourselves? And so we bought a few microphones and small little M audio interface at the time, and just like let's figure out how to record ourselves. And I was kind of like the person tasked with figuring it out. And so we did that, and that worked out pretty okay. And a comment that we've been getting a lot from people in our town was, it sounds really good. Your songs suck a little bit, but it sounds really good. And so then other people started coming to me and like, hey, well, our music doesn't suck. Can you record us? So, essentially, and that's how it started, so to speak. And I was actually going to a business school at the time. And then I moved to United States, and I'm from Russia originally. Okay. I failed to mention that part. Small town in Russia, and so I moved to United States. And so the way the credit transfer would work is I was in the third year, and certain subjects I would actually have to take again because they weren't an exact match.
I understand that. I had that happen when I changed schools, and it sucks.
Yeah, and I was like, man, I have one more year, and if I ever wanted to just finish my degree, I just go back and I do one more year of studying in the college I was at, and I would get a bachelor's degree, in business and management, and well, I can always do that. Let's try something else. And I'm really into this recording thing. And so I decided to go to a recording school in America. And in my mind at the time was like, well, if you want to do something, you have to go to college. Turns out not necessarily as I get into this industry. And sometimes it might be more beneficial not to. But again, those are...
that's a debate to have, right?
That's a debate. And that's one of those things where like, well... is it worth it? And what is the biggest thing you kind of get out of education? I think it's like in general, like the way education is structured in the U.S. is very different, and there's a big debate to be had about it in general.
It's expensive in the U.S. Education.
It's expensive, and
it's for profit, and it's like, and they're fishing for people to kind of stay in the system, and and to get these degree after degree. So you can say it. granted, there's a lot of flexibility. There's a lot of information to be had. But
and nowadays, especially, like you actually for the first time in human history,
YouTube is pretty awesome. And
pretty cool.
There's other resources too, and I think that's some of the things to talk about too. At some point in time, is like it used to be that the information was concentrated in schools, and that's where you
absolutely
could go.
Yeah.
But now we've entered this new era where there is a lot more access. It's not just YouTube; it's all over. There's all types of different sites and pages and places that you can go to gain information. And so I think that's a beautiful.
From like Skillshare to a bunch of obscure websites that do like master classes and stuff like that. Absolutely.
Definitely.
And there are some niche ones that are more specific to each field, so to speak. For example, in audio, there is this fantastic resource called Mix with the Masters.
Yeah, which is such a great one.
You've heard of it, yeah, you're right. Yeah, by the way, I've heard some of your music. It's really cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, my wife is the
it's very, very heartwarming.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So my wife. I love music. I grew up singing and in choirs and such, and I love making music. But like for a long time, that wasn't my thing. I went to medical school. I was studying medicine.
Wow.
And then I was miserable. Cool. I was miserable. And like, I didn't want to be a doctor. And so I dropped out of school and I was working in films and TV. And I moved back to Vietnam,
very cool,
where I met my wife. And so she's the first winner of Vietnam Idol. And she's a professional singer here. And so, I just was always helping her with her stuff. But then when she had our daughter, suddenly she didn't have much work. And she's like, do you want to sing some songs with me? And I was like, I don't know about that, man.
Very cool.
Yeah. So we started singing it and it kind of became something. And
kind of got into where it is.
Yeah.
It's super cool. That's a really cool story.
And it's like,
I love that.
But you never know. And it's like, just like you're sitting there and you started out with studying this stuff to record your own music, but then this turned into something else, which turned into something else.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I see, I see behind you, it definitely turned into something else, much more.
It did a little bit.
Yeah. So you came, you were studying, and you went down this other path. What happened after that?
Yeah. So while I was in college, and like how I ended up doing sound for film and stuff like that. As I was in college, I just really got into and like very interested in the field of sound design, and that kind of led me down the rabbit hole of like figuring out like, all right, films have sound.
Yeah,
that is cool. Something a lot of people don't think about, myself back in the day included. Like, all right, well, and that's definitely a profession to be had, and that's something one could do. And so I went down that rabbit hole, and something that I found myself just gravitating to, and it kind of goes back to just me trying to figure stuff out, is I was getting like pretty good at workflows that had to do with either restoration or not necessarily even like design and creative part of it, but say with dialogue editing, for example, right? Where I would have a ear that kind of tuned to hearing the little pops and clicks and like having an ability to kind of figure out how to get rid of a lot of this stuff very quickly. And so then I completely abandoned music and just got really like narrow focused on everything that had to do with film sound. And I at the time thought, I was like, dialogue editing, that's cool. I want to do a lot of that. And then I moved out to LA with a bunch of friends of mine, none of whom did sound. And I think that's the biggest benefit to be had at schools, is that you actually get to meet people who will work not only in your field, but also in the fields that are attached or like connected with what you do. So I moved out here with a group of people who studied film, me studying sound. And so immediately had that opportunity to help them out on their small projects that with time became a little bit bigger projects. And then they met people who also did what they do, and they're like, well, we know this guy and he's pretty good. Not always at the time, but he does this thing that you might benefit from, and he's cheap at the time. And so I did that, and for about a year I was just constantly looking for either an internship or a job. But I found myself just doing a lot of small gigs. I did a bunch of YouTube series with people that I met, or just like individual YouTube short films that were like super popular in early 2010s, and that whole thing was kind of picking up. I did series with Epic Mealtime. Muscle Glasses, where it was like a twist on one of the characters in the original show, and they kind of explored the origin of the character, and that was a lot of fun and just absolutely ridiculous and funny, kind of like comedy skits, and a bunch of things with this YouTube channel called Mars Rising Films, and most of the work was kind of through them. Yeah. Besides that point, I was still struggling to find like an actual real job. And the first thing that kind of fell into my lap was an internship at a studio where there wasn't much information on the job application. So I went there kind of having no idea of where I'm going. I was like, all right, it's a studio. And as I walk in and kind of like look around, figure things out. All right, it's a facility that has definitely to do something with music, and looks like probably music for film. All right, okay. And so I'm sitting at the interview, and I'm telling, as I learned later, the owner is like, if you're looking for somebody to help you with music, I'm probably not the guy. Because quite frankly, I'm not classically trained. I've been in the band, but I mostly torture guitars, not play them. And but if you're looking for somebody who is more on the technical side, who is able to figure things out and just like help around the studio, maybe record, I can do that. You're like, well, this is for an internship, right? We're not hiring, like, and I'm like, one of my first interviews ever. I don't know any better. I'm like, well, idea of having interns is to grow them and to find people that would be suitable for actual work in your studio, hopefully. And so I'm just kind of putting it out there, like, if you're looking for somebody who is a musician, I'm not the person. And it turns out they were actually looking for a technical assistant. And it just kind of worked out. And so, like, I had my internship for about, like, a week and a half or so. Maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks. And they're like, well, do you want to be they already had the technical assistant at the time, and they're like, would you want to be our second tech? And that turned into a really cool, really beautiful, I think, 3-year job that I did with them. And we worked on a lot of incredible films. And I got to first try things and fail. And it didn't go too well at times. But I figured things out, and it kind of became big part of the team. And not only helping out with like setting up computers and maybe or microphones, but also making sure the workflow is nice and efficient, and like things flow from A to B. And when we get to the end of the project, we have the capacity to do that, to kind of deliver everything, but also to continue doing changes and so on and so forth. It was interesting because in a small team you often end up wearing a lot of different hats, and that's where I found that was something very appealing to me, and it was probably easy to figure out beforehand as I was kind of dipping into all these different things. But that's when I kind of figured, I'm actually pretty good at switching tasks, just like from one to another. And yeah, it worked really well. And then I got to mix a few projects for them, one of which led to this beautiful thing behind me.
Yeah.
And then in parallel to that, even though those were like really long work days, and we worked 6 days a week, I constantly kept just looking for other things, and just figuring out what other skills I can develop, and what else can I do. and I ended up freelancing for this company doing quality control work. Just so they would send me video and, let's say, audio source, and I would listen down and figure out like what issues in that final print would be, send them a detailed QC report, and it kind of helped me continue training my ear and just like kind of figuring out, all right, those are the possible issues, and if I hear this particular thing, what is it called? Because again, I was still like fairly new to that game at the time. Plus, I'm in a country that everybody speaks English, and I'm not from here, so figuring out what people call things sometimes is very interesting. And I did that for them for about 2 years. So like as I was working at the first company, I was also freelancing for the second company, and they would constantly kind of approach me like, hey, we also have a full-time position. And I would be like, well, right now is not necessarily good time because we're in the middle of a project, and like it would really suck to leave right now. Like I don't want to be that person. Until one day, kind of like things came to a point where we were at the end of the project. We just wrapped something, wrapped a score, and these guys approached me again. I was like, you know what? If I'll ever make a jump, right now is the time. And I was like, at the very least, let me come out for an interview. And it was a very different structure, where it was instead of just like ambiguous hours, it was like it's a set schedule. You work 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. There's health insurance and so on and so forth. I'm like, all right, that sounds interesting. Something like I feel like I'm at the point where I can switch to that type of schedule in my life and just have a little bit more control over my free time, so to speak, because I will have the free time. And so, that's what I started doing. I started doing QC work for them, and then slowly learning other things that the company did. We have this really cool workflow that I think only two companies that I'm aware of in the world do, where we can take a final master of something, whether it's a film or a song, and we can actually split it out into individual tracks or food groups with very good results. So it's not like some of those pieces of software where you throw it in and kind of removes the vocal or whatever. We can actually separate dialogue and effects and music very cleanly, and it can be rebalanced later on, or individual elements can be used.
That's really
and so
wild.
we did a lot of work. It's really cool. It's really bizarre, sort of like proprietary workflow. But the cool thing is that led us to do some work with a few companies that do like hologram shows, for example.
Interesting.
That's if the singer is no longer alive, and let's say they're an opera singer, and there are no stems to speak of. It's all recorded live on stage, and now they want that singer to perform with a brand new live orchestra, so to speak. How do you do that? And so that was one of the projects that had involvement in just figuring out how to separate the singing vocal from the rest of the music so that they can utilize that in the show.
That's wild. That's wild.
It's pretty cool.
That's really wild. I mean, because like I've seen shows like this. Like they had the one that a lot of people know about was when Tupac came back on stage.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, that was like one of the first ones.
That was one of the first ones. That was like everyone's like, "Whoa, mind blown!" There was Tupac up there. But like they still had his music. And I'm sure that they still
for him they had the stems.
The stems.
I would imagine
an opera singer that was also always singing live. They do not have the stems. That's just fascinating that you can then go back in and remove different elements. But I mean, as technology advances, it's going to be things that we might have seen as absolutely impossible become totally achievable, and then after achievable become the norm. It's like it's insane.
It's like the same stuff that happens with all the And we can debate about the morality of them, but from purely technological perspective, all the deepfakes are very fascinating. There's this YouTube channel called Corridor Digital, which I'm sure most people have heard of, and they do a lot of really fun deepfakes. They did one with Keanu Reeves and one with Tom Cruise, if I'm not mistaken. And the Keanu Reeves one is really funny, like where he I think saves the he stops a armed robbery by being a nice person. It's really funny. If somebody haven't checked it out, I highly suggest it. Just a lot of fun, and they obviously didn't have Keanu Reeves on set, and they just defaked it on another actor, and it looked really convincing, and just like very interesting, like how you can utilize these technologies for creative purposes. Obviously, you can utilize it for other things, but the creative part is what interests me.
Yeah, I mean, granted, any technology that emerges can be used for good uses or bad.
Or for bad, yeah, of course, 100%.
It's like it's like a knife. If you grab a knife by the handle, you can cook a meal. If you grab a knife by the blade, you're not gonna have a good day. You know what I mean?
Well, it can be a meal as well. If you're a vampire, perhaps.
Right.
Just went to my Russian side there.
Oh,
but yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, we are Dracula fans in my house. Granted, my daughter
very cool.
watched a lot of the Hotel Transylvania, and that got her tuned onto it. But the other day, I have Bram Stoker's Dracula, the book, and she got a bunch of bookmarks from the bookstore, and I just set a bunch of books down so that she could put bookmarks in them. And she's like, "What does this say?" And I says, "That says Dracula." And she looked up at me and she's like, "Yeah,
I want that." Yeah.
And I was like, "But that's the real Dracula. That's not Hotel Transylvania. It's the real Dracula book." And
it's different. Like, yes. Yeah.
"It's okay, Daddy. I like it." I was like, "All right, cool.
Let's do it."
Let's do it.
Nice. I love that.
Yeah, it's awesome.
It's fascinating.
So, you're working with all this really interesting technology. You're at this company that's doing interesting things. What are some of the things that you would like to accomplish? What are some of the where do you want to take this journey that you're on? Where would you like to end up?
One of the things I am getting more and more into is working with bands and individual musicians. It kind of came full circle. I will just I guess I'll skim through the last portion of it as well.
No, take your time.
As I did. No, but it's like I do want to get to the point. I think it will be more interesting to talk about that. As I was doing that, naturally, me being me and like being really into this multitasking thing, I things kind of switched around where instead of working for company A and freelancing for company B, I started working for company B and then continued freelancing for company A, still helping out with certain aspects of how they run their studio. And in parallel to that, I got back into recording bands and working with musicians. And I think that is very interesting. I would love to continue doing what I do and just continue getting better at, specifically like dubbing workflows are very interesting to me. And what I found myself doing more and more of, and instead of like being an editor that I thought I would be very interested in, I started doing a lot of more mixing. And I think that is just like the most awesome thing I've ever experienced thus far. And that's super interests me a lot. And I see myself doing that for a real long time. But also in parallel to that, working with musicians and working on something that is completely opposite workflow-wise and just like mindset-wise from dubbing or even first-round mixing for TV and for film. Just having this full control, not really caring about if something sounds natural and more caring about like, oh, it doesn't sound cool. Can we do something creative with this? Can we mess a sound up in a creative way that will evoke an emotion? That is very, very cool and interesting to me. And I've been getting more and more into it, and I like it.
That's awesome.
I see myself doing more.
You think about the early musicians. Not early, but like early like rock musicians that started throwing distortion onto their amps. That's not early musicians, but like early rock that really started like throwing throwing they're throwing some distortion onto the
Yeah.
guitar signal, and it was just like, whoa, what is that? And it just was this very creative approach to that sound, and suddenly it opens new doorways and it evokes a different response, and how for us now everything is so possible. There's so much possible because there's so much so many capabilities that the in the box software have, where
Of
like
course, yeah.
you can go into a virtual instrument and then throw on a distortion signal that mimics the exact box of a British amp that was this size, and it's insane, like how they were.
It's really cool, definitely, yeah. And it keeps getting better.
Right.
That's the best part.
It does, and I mean it's like it's still not fully there, but it's pretty freaking remarkable now. It's still.
It's really cool. It's definitely usable and creatively. Oh my god!
Yeah, exactly.
One of the best things.
It even stuff that sounds rudimentary. You go back to like, I was talking to someone about how the 80s sounds have kind of come back full circle. A lot of these they do not. Like if you go to an old synthesizer, an 80s synthesizer, and go to its strings, it does not sound like strings. It sounds like it's some 80s synth string, but it's got an amazingly cool sound, and it's interesting to see how people can go back and embrace that now, and just be like, you know what, it's special. There was did you ever know that toy, the Furby?
Can't say I have. No.
Isn't it? It's like 90s toy. Furby was this little like weird, creepy, weird robot.
I do remember it.
Furby.
Yes.
It was like it got these big eyes.
Yep.
And some guy destroyed that thing, ripped it apart, and then hooked it up to a synth. And so it was like the synth was like emanating all these weird sounds that were coming out of this Furby. And I guess this guy is really famous in the synth world for trying wild things, right? And I was just like, it's so disturbingly awesome that, like, here's this thing that emits sound, and then you can take it and go, how can we distort this? How can we run this through some different, types of signal chains to see what we can come up with, That's awesome.
100%.
It's awesome.
I mean, like, just coming up with different creative ways to use synth is a very interesting area as well. Like people do crazy things like taking apart Game Boys or old consoles and just like using chips in them to create music. We actually the Emmy there is for a show called Verbitskiy. It's a documentary. It's a Newson documentary Emmy. We created a synth kind of like rack, I want to say, to recreate sounds of ship chassis moving through water and creating this massive rattling sounds that essentially disturb life in the ocean, and that's the whole premise of the show, is like it's noise pollution in the ocean.
That's wild.
And so we created a synth that did essentially recreate that, but in a more musical way. Like it was understandable what it is, and but was being a synth, it's now controllable and can be played, and we just ran that through an amp essentially and just recorded portions of that, sampled that, and the composer used that throughout the score. Anytime large ships would come on screen, and create this like massive ominous tone that worked together with the sound effects the sound sound design team put in there. But that would be like a more musical element that signified the sort of like the negative nature of the sound that these like old school ship designs create in the ocean, and the impact it has on the environment. If you have a chance to watch the documentary, it's very interesting. You can.
Again, what is the name of it?
That's a custom.
So people can find
Verbitskiy.
Okay.
Verbitskiy.
Verbitskiy.
Yeah.
Now, that's awesome, man. Why did you find this movement back toward music, toward bands and such, and musicians? What was it that motivated that?
It's I think it just kind of fell into place. I don't think there was one thing that excuse me. Just have a sip of water.
Not a problem. It wasn't a cat.
Much better than a cat. Hopefully.
Yeah, right.
But no, yeah, it just kind of fell into place. Quite honestly, there isn't. I don't think there is like one reason for it. Well, I guess one of the big reasons is around 2000. I know you interviewed Roxana Line on your show, and we have been friends since 2012 when I was still going to school, and we kind of reconnected around 2015, and I think from there, like we started doing a few small projects here and there, and I think she would be like a very big motivation in, I guess, starting that journey, and still I think some of the coolest music that I get to mix is her music, and it's very special. I'm sure you've heard.
Yes, she's awesome.
Which it doesn't yet.
She's such a great spirit and like person as well.
She is.
She's
absolutely.
Just such a cool person. Like, I won't hate on anyone. Everyone I have on my show is really awesome. But like,
agreed.
She is one of the most. It's interesting, right? Because like, for me, I have I look at people. Of course, I'm going to treat everyone professionally, but for me, I'm like, I'm cool with treating people like friends. After I have an hour-long conversation with someone, we're friends on some level.
You get to know them a little bit, yeah.
Like, and she's just like constantly likes my photos and just leaves nice comments, and it's just like, that's awesome. We come from an industry that is very much. There is a ton in Hollywood, in not just Hollywood, but like in the music industry and in the different industries, of people who are like, "What can you do for me?" You know what I mean? And I've seen it. I've been there, and I hopefully haven't done it too much. I mean, certainly we all want to further our career, but I try to be really genuine and real with people. And if I do pitch something,
I think it's important, yeah.
And if I pitch something to people, it's something that I think would be reciprocally beneficial, not necessarily like, how can you help me? But she's just such a genuine person, and it just comes with just her honest, self, and that to me is so special, because we need more people like that. We need more people that,
I agree.
Granted, we all want to get ahead, but you can still be a nice human being and try to get ahead. You know what I mean? That's my perspective.
100%, yeah. And it's also, I think, like, part of it is cultural, and a huge part of it is just a personal thing, because she is very special. But coming from Russia as well, it's definitely one of those things where you're like, there is certain significance to a word friend that I don't think necessarily is translating 100% in, at least not in America. I can't say for other English-speaking countries, but here it's very easy to just call anybody friend. You just met somebody, or you're like, oh, I'm feeling good vibes. We're friends now. To call somebody a friend, and at least like in the environment where I grew up, that means a lot. It's a big commitment to call somebody a friend, because for a friend you'll do a lot. And with Roxana, it's not the easiest thing to become her friend, but once you do, you'll never have a better friend than her. Yeah,
that's interesting. That's a good point, and I see that I've lived around the world, and we have different countries approach friendship in different ways. But like, as I've gotten older, I reserve the word friend for maybe about 5 people. Everyone else, we are, I mean, and I just said that I'm friends with everyone that I do a podcast with. But like, to be real, like, I have a good relationship with these people. But like, real friends, I understand what you're saying. Like, If I had a problem and I called about 3 of my friends, they would get on a plane, fly their butts out to wherever I'm at in the world, and do whatever they needed to help me. I have about 5 friends that would do that. 5, you know? And I've got the same number of friends that I would do that for, you know? Like I would pick up whatever I was doing and go and help. And I think it's powerful when you can really say that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I think at the end of the day, it just comes to a word, because friend and drug in Russian are those are the words that in the dictionary you'll look up, one as a translation of the other. But I think in English, really, we're all friends, but those are my best friends.
Yeah.
And really, the meaning of best friend is the meaning a lot of people where I grew up put into a word friend. And so you just, and there's a separate word that would kind of be translated, I guess, as acquaintance, but here it feels weird to call somebody an acquaintance.
It's like, kind of disrespectful.
It's bad. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's a very different tone. That therefore, I think whatever is normally translated as acquaintance to Russian, I think that is friend here, just culturally, and best friend is what people from Russia, or again, at least from the region where I'm from, would refer to as best friend. That's what we think of friend.
So where are you from in Russia, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, of course. I'm from a city called Irkutsk. It's near Lake Baikal, and if you played game Risk, it's on the map.
That's awesome.
only for the reason that it's next to Lake Baikal, which is the deepest lake in the world, and till certain period of time, till certain mark of time, it was one of the cleanest water supplies in the world, which it no longer is, unfortunately. So
that sucks, but totally.
Yeah.
What happens? But that's really interesting because, it is very interesting that we have these different approaches to things, and each culture has a very unique way of looking at things. And one of the things that you poked at that I've always found is really interesting is languages don't actually translate. They don't.
No, it's the meaning, right? It's like, what are you trying to say, as opposed to the word by word.
Exactly. And like and sometimes there's thoughts that you cannot say in another language. Like there are certain things you can
100%.
get the idea of it, but you can't translate it. And I think that's like something that people who don't speak a second or third language, it's an injustice, because we have this idea that our worldview is absolute, and that
that's very true. Yeah.
have the same worldview I do. It's
no.
It's so far from the truth. And this is one of the things that I was reading has caused constant conflicts, throughout world history, because people are sitting at a table, all these politicians, and you think like me, and no, they don't. They don't. And there's so many different ways to look at things, and languages shape the way we see everything.
If you ever speak with Roxana again, talk to her about languages, because I think she's on her 9th or 13th language
awesome.
that she's studying.
Awesome.
Yeah,
that's I'll remember that. I'm gonna get her back on. She's gonna pop back onto the podcast in the next month or two. I'm coming back to the States to visit for a month.
Oh, right.
And
really cool.
So I'll probably...
Where to?
My family's in California, and so I'll be
cool.
in... my family lives up in Northern California, up in the Napa Valley, which is a beautiful place to visit.
Beautiful, absolutely, yeah.
It's expensive. It's an expensive place to live.
But it's so special.
It's so beautiful. Yeah. So we'll be up there for a bit, and then I'll dive back into my podcast once I return back to Vietnam. But it's good to get back stateside. But one of the things that I've noticed, like getting back to our language thing, is living in a different country. Like there's just very, very diverse worldviews, and I think that if we can get people to travel and see the world, it gives us such a great experience. Like, God, I would love to visit Lake Baikal. I would love to go someday.
I always tell people the nature in Russia is beautiful. Otherwise, travel might not be worth it, and definitely something to think twice about.
Yeah. How's culturally? Is it? Is it challenging?
It's not the most welcoming place, and a lot of people are, there's like this sort of like stereotype that Russians are like really mean and like always the bad guys in films and whatnot. It's not a direct truth, so to speak. I don't think
you tell me
most people that I know
James Bond was lying, you know.
Oh my god. Yeah, no, I think it's very easy to think that, and it's partially because everybody's trying to keep to themselves, and a lot of people are just very private. And like here in the United States, you walk on the street and just say hi to somebody, and if you be bubbly and kind of say hi to some random person on the street, they'll be like, "Are you trying to rob me?" Or like, "What's up? Like, you want to go?"
Yeah, right.
You just like, if you're going somewhere, keep going there. Like, don't enter my personal space, my world. I'm just going somewhere where I'm going, and it's just like a cultural thing. Like, I don't think people are trying to be mean, but to foreigners, it can come across that way. But it's I guess it's like if you've ever lived in a large city, it's a little bit similar to that. But even if you're in a small city in Russia, it's going to be like that, where you just, if they see somebody they don't know, they're probably not going to care unless you approach them, and then there'll be a bit of a hesitation to like, all right, are you an okay person to interact with? And there's certain barrier you need to kind of like cross, and some ice you need to break. In Russia, ice, it makes sense. It's cold. Both the weather and the people are fairly harsh.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, those things kind of go hand in hand. When you have a difficult climate, people have to be survivors. Yeah,
I don't have the time to stop and talk to you when it's -40 outside.
Yeah, right.
Like, I'm trying not to freeze and get from point A to point B.
Yeah, right. It's so true, man. It's so true. And granted, like the last 100 years have been tough in Russia. It's like there's been a lot that went on. You have a revolution, you have World War II, you have all of the Soviet expansion. There was a lot going on that people in Russia had to process, and
absolutely,
a lot there,
and they still do to this day.
Yeah,
there's still a lot going on.
That's interesting, but nature's beautiful, so you got to take it.
Nature is absolutely, it's very interesting because it's like it's the largest country in the world, but it's also not a very densely populated one. So it's still very easy to just drive out a couple of, I don't know, like from 20 to like 70 kilometers out of the city, and
there's no one.
You're in a place there's like absolutely no one. Yeah.
This is something that my wife was blown away by. Vietnam is kind of like the size of California, but in that space, they've got like 70 million people crammed into like just that one space, and most of them live right along the coast. Most of the people in Vietnam live along the coastline. That's just the way it is, right? So it
makes sense.
Pretty densely populated, in the regions where people are at, and then you're dealing with pretty much city to city to city. It's not city, but there's a lot of spaces where it's like village to city to village, and stuff like that. But when we got to California, and I know Russia, they're different, but there's a similarity in they are big. U.S. is big, Russia is big, and like we were like driving, a couple hundred kilometers just to get to this next place that we were going. And my wife's like, "How long? We're going so fast, and it's so far." And like when we got up into the woods, where my mom lives is the Napa Valley is nice, but you just go up the hillside and you're in really rural country, and there's not a lot of people around. My wife was like, "Where are the people? Like, where are the people?" It's like this. It was kind of like a mind blown type of a thing. And I had a job offer back in that region, and I didn't take it because I just was like, if I take these people, my wife and my daughter, out of cities, and there's not anything, and I dump them out in the middle of the countryside, they're gonna kill me. And I'm like, no, not a good situation, man.
Quite honestly, even like downtown, I mean, we're here in Burbank, and I mean, It often doesn't feel like a city.
No.
Because everything is like 2-3 stories tall,
Right.
and even if you go downtown LA, which is like the city, you're like, all right, well, I have 4 streets that are city. What about the rest of it? And where I'm from, a fairly small, I even refer to it as a town sometimes, but I guess it's a city. But it's you have the entirety of it. Maybe not necessarily like you don't have skyscrapers whatsoever, but there are many like street to streets, large buildings, at least like 4 or 5 stories tall, more than that. And usually the way it's set up is like your first floors are businesses, and then there are apartments above them. And it's not quite as many individual homes. Like, you still have those, but it's not as common as it is here. Here, cities are wide.
Yeah.
And at least, again, where I'm from, cities tend to be more condensed, where I could walk from one side of our town to the other one in about like 2 hours or so, I would imagine.
LA?
If I
Good
rush,
luck.
maybe like, yeah, good luck getting to a grocery store in that time,
Yeah,
if you're
right.
just like in the middle of a suburb, right?
Right.
And there you'd like cross boutiques and, museums and, like bookstores and whatever you want. Like, if you live in an apartment, there is very likely a very basic grocery store in your building.
Right.
Because they are like every
Same here.
next block around, and it's very easy. You just like walk outside and get bread and milk, whatever else you need, and go back. It takes you 2 seconds. Here it's like it's a whole experience.
Right. I was like, what absolutely blew me away for population density was when I visited Tokyo. Like,
Oh, I would imagine.
you're standing on top of this building, and like in LA, say you're standing on top of a tall building, you look out, all right, city goes this way, but then it stops over here. There's mountains and stuff. Tokyo, city as far as you can see this way, city as far as you can see this way, city as far as you see that way. It's just like, and it's not like they go down. It's like tall buildings. I was just like, oh my gosh, this is insane, man. I'm absolutely mind blown.
Moscow is a very similar way. Yeah.
Yeah, that's wild. Now, if you could go back in time and give your younger self some advice, what advice would you give yourself?
Quite honestly, don't worry too much about being laser focused on whatever thing. And I think,
Sorry.
Do you have a cat?
Just dropped my pen.
Oh, it's all good. Just back to the joke you made at the beginning.
No. Of course, it was a well
jumping.
Well played.
I gotcha. But no, yeah, it's I think just like don't worry about. We often hear in this industry that you got to find a niche, right? You got to be a master of one thing, and I think it is actually plenty okay to try different things and be master of many of them, so to speak, and have people coming to you for different reasons. And diversification in your skills is actually can be a very beneficial thing, as opposed to this thing that especially in colleges, like they scare you, like, well, you try too many things, you'll become good at none of them, and nobody will hire you. No, just try stuff. Do as much as you possibly can figure out, if that's your personality, of course. And I guess for myself, younger self, that would be the case. And just keep trying stuff. It all comes into play at one point or another, and just like being able to fall back onto these different things, it's fascinating. Right now, for example, I'll go a little small tangent, but
please do. I love tangents.
Getting into like 3D modeling, virtual production, just as a hobby. Like, I don't plan to do anything with it right now, but maybe at some point in the future it'll come in handy as well. But it's just like, again, the way my brain works, I work all the time, but I also want to learn new stuff, so that it's fun. Learning's fun.
I like that. I've been going to my career a while, and I just started writing music, and I've been doing directing and producing and filmmaking and content creation. And I was like, I'm really enjoying writing songs. I don't know if it's going to be something I can make money at, but I like it. So why not do it, man? It's just like,
absolutely,
everyone who says that you should pick something or you should settle in, granted, there's something that's nice about having a stable income. That's great. But, you can have that and still be creative. You can have that and still follow your dreams. It's like you can balance stuff. And you don't have to just be like, I'm going to be this guy. And, keeping the blinders on. You can be diverse. You can be fantastic.
100%, yeah. And in fact, if you don't have a dream, you can just look what people around you, what are their dreams, and see how can you be useful in realizing their dreams. And that can be a really cool thing to do as well.
That's actually an awesome point. Sometimes you don't have to have your whole
like a big
vision,
one place where you're just like, I'm going that way. It's very true for myself. Like, I don't really know where I'm going, but I do know that day to day I just try to be as helpful as I can possibly be to people around me, and that's awesome, and it keeps me going from day to day.
That's awesome, brother. Drop the mic with that one. That's awesome.
Oh no, come on. Mics are expensive and
right, they really are. Anytime that I see someone dropping a mic on stage, I'm like, why would you do that?
No.
Don't do that.
For comedic effect.
Yeah,
I get why, but no, please don't.
Right, exactly.